Was seen between Paramyscus leucopus populations and fern cover, coarse-woody debris, and soil moisture. Well, the positive correlation is supported by evidence of numerous studies that point to Paramyscus species preferring ground cover. Also, fern species, if you think about it, are typically found in moist environments. Not all ferns, it's most ferns. This in turn relates to the positive correlation of soil moisture to the Paramyscus populations. Also, in a study by Johnson and Jorgensen, Paramyscus species were found to have an increased ability to detect seeds and food in a moist environment. They really didn't explain why. I would like to know, but they didn't really go over that. Studies also suggest that the white-footed mice use coarse-woody debris preferentially for travel orientation, foraging, nesting, and refuge. However, the preferential use of this coarse-woody debris does not necessarily imply that it is a critical habitat component. It's just, or that it enhances their population. It's just they prefer it. It's not necessary for them to survive. It's been shown in a lot of studies that if the coarse-woody debris has no impact. Just in my study, it seemed to have a relationship to where I captured them to the animals. Like, for instance, one of my sites was covered in coarse-woody debris. It was just crisscrossing logs. I mean, big pine trees, just logs laying everywhere. And I had just about the main percentage of my captures on that for the 1 month post-treatment. I think I caught 30, close to 30 on that one site. It was not uncommon to get a trap on every trap to be tripped or full of animals when you come out there that morning. So, in relation to a negative correlation was seen in tree density. This is very similar to results found by Duscher and Shugart. They found that Paramyscus occurred at sites with a low density of trees. To me, I think that means that the animals don't like if you have a real amount of trees, dense amount of trees, it just kind of covers up the understory vegetation, which then they don't have that much vegetation, which means you don't have as many animals. That's just my opinion on that. Microhabitat characteristics that show a correlation with total small mammal capture numbers tended to suggest negative correlation with tree density, positive correlation with soil moisture, and coarse-woody debris. This is very similar to what is seen comparing the Paramyscus populations, except for the fern cover. I figure that's likely due to the amount of high captures of Paramyscus, saying it was the most, mostly all I caught. I think the statistics there, since it really was not needed to do the total. I just did it because. During mammal sampling, no ticks were found in captured mammals. And also, none of the tissue samples tested positive for Borrelia lone stari. I mean, ticks could have been present, but if they were in the larval stage, they would very likely not saw, because they're so small that it'd been impossible to see them almost. Especially as much as they move around, and considering the mammals are, most of them are brown, the ticks are the same color as their fur. I mean, I found fleas, that kind of things, but never a tick. It's not been shown that small mammals are major hosts of the tick, so therefore the likelihood of them being vectors for Borrelia lone stari needs to be researched a little further. It's also been shown that in regions of the southeastern United States with high herpetofaunal density, the ticks parasitize reptiles more than occur in the northern populations where they're just parasitized on the mammals mostly. And this use of an alternative host could drastically alter the ecology of the Borrelia species. This research supports previous research that prescribed burning positively influences small mammal populations for a time after burning, but the mammal communities eventually decline as time from the burning increases. Also, the relationship between small mammals and tick species, particularly the Lone Star tick, needs to be researched further in the south to determine the small mammal's role as a reservoir for Lone Star. That's basically it. I would think on that last statement saying between the small, my study doesn't point to them being a relationship, but I think a larger sample would need to be done and maybe keep the animals overnight it's been shown that you can keep them overnight, put them over, or a couple days, they'll drop the ticks off. The ticks will drop off when they get done feeding. Then that would be a more effective way of looking for ticks. I don't think you need to comb them. That's not, to me, that's not effective. I think it should be done the other way. But then I didn't want to have to go into the detail of bringing them back. That's kind of a real complicated matter with bringing them back. I didn't keep up with them and assist them. Does anybody have any questions? Go ahead.
Would you attribute the fact that the small animal population declining after the vegetation sort of dies out as a result of an increase in predation?
What now? Predation? After the burn, the vegetation goes away after the burn? Could be. I would say it's more likely food, though, because if there's no ground vegetation, there's not very much for them to eat. I mean, it could be predation, though. Very likely. Yeah, Richard?
Did you really want to positive control of known infected tissue when you did PCR?
Yes.
And that gave you positive result?
We had the positive from this tick sample that Damien and the one Dr. Murdoch, when they run all the ticks from the medical clinics.
But you didn't have like a known.
I didn't have a tissue sample, no.
So it could be your materials and methods that you get a positive.
Could be, yes.
What's the sensitivity of the assay?
I don't know. Do you have a question, Brett?
I'm sure you said it. What were your traps? Define a trap. What was the
My trap was a Sherman live animal trap. It's a little snap trap, box trap. Has an opening in each end. You just snap it clips down. They walk in, trip the pressure plate, and they're stuck. They had some this big. I had small ones for, and then I also had large traps that you would use in relation for a larger animal like your chipmunks. A lot of times the chipmunks couldn't fit in the little traps. They try. I think they would try because like those big hispids are a lot bigger than the other mammals. They would get in there and then get stuck. The trap wouldn't even close all the way. So the chipmunks basically got in just the large traps, but nothing else. Like the little mice wouldn't hardly get in the large traps. I don't understand why, but I mainly caught the mice in the small traps. It's like they were relating to their size. Do you have a question, Carter?
You talked about the ticks on the mice. What species of ticks were you talking about?
I was looking for any ticks. It would have been deer ticks, the Ixoides, or Lone Star ticks, the Abelion.
And why do you think you didn't find any ticks at all?
I really can't say. I mean, they've got to be on something else if they're not there. Or, like I said, I didn't see.
Do Lone Star ticks get on small mammals?
It's not really been shown.
Are there any deer ticks out there?
Well, we hadn't found any in
Maybe
Damien's.
you didn't catch any, so maybe
I mean, we found
maybe
just
deer ticks aren't there.
possibly. I mean, that's a good likely.
Or maybe they climb up a little higher on the vegetation and get on the larger mammals.
That's what I was thinking.
What season were you in? Over what months did you do?
April to April. So a year basically. Kind of a good variation. Like winter trapping is I did winter trapping as well. You put a piece of cotton in there and it keeps them alive or tries to keep them alive over the night. When we got really cold, I closed the traps due to just animals dying whether the cotton was in there or not because I just wasn't going to kill a bunch. Because I went out after the first night of trapping, I had like one left alive out of like 6. And then I went out again thinking maybe it was just really cold that night. Next night there was only a few alive again, so I closed them in the winter. But otherwise, just to reduce mortality, because I was killing just about every one of them, which I know they reproduce fast, but I'd rather not kill all of them.
You were saying something about the research on reptile, on ticks and reptiles. Where was this? Where was your areas in relation to where Chris was doing his lizard studies?
Same general areas.
Really?
Yeah, Chris had a site. When on site 10, I was talking about along the creek. Chris had one right on the other side of the creek. By one of my 1 month sites, I think Chris had one maybe a couple 100 yards over the hill. And then the other sites, they were really close, within probably a couple 100 yards of each other almost.
Remember right, he didn't find anything in it?
No.